I didn't try to demystify or debunk or deconstruct these fellows I wrote about. They were the real deal. They definitely were worthy of legendary status. Bat Masterson really did shoot down 2 Texas cowboys who had just killed his brother on the streets of Dodge City. Wild Bill Hickok really did shoot an opponent in a gunfight through the heart at a distance of 75 yards. And if you've ever shot a pistol, particularly a pistol of that vintage, that's a miraculous shot. But Wild Bill Hickok was really a deadly gunfighter and really a crack shot. George Custer was a bona fide Civil War hero. He had 7 horses shot out from under him during different battles in the Civil War, and he was a key part of the Union's victory at the Battle of Gettysburg. And as an Army scout, Buffalo Bill Cody once rode 350 miles in 60 hours on a mule to carry dispatches back and forth between 3 Army forts. And he had to walk the last 10 miles because the mule ran away. Of course, there's a less heroic part to that story in that when Buffalo Bill caught up with the mule, he shot him. So the people I wrote about are certainly legend-worthy, and just on what they really did, let alone the stories that were made up about them. So one of the things I found interesting was that there were people that were equally legend-worthy who aren't legends. And I don't really know why, if there's a single answer to that. And I'll give you an example. There was a fellow named Bill Tillman. He had a law enforcement career that spanned 50 years. He was a deputy sheriff, a city marshal, a deputy federal marshal, and chief of police. He was in more gunfights and shootouts than Bat Masterson, Wyatt Earp, and Wild Bill Hickok combined. Masterson wrote about him, "It would take a volume the size of an encyclopedia to record the many daring exploits and adventures of this remarkable man." Tillman even died a Wild West legend death. He was killed in a gunfight outside a speakeasy in Tulsa at the age of 70. But I doubt more than 1 or 2 of you have ever heard of Bill Tillman. On the other hand, there was a 21-year-old thief and murderer whose Wild West career lasted less than a decade, and has had more than 50 movies made about him. His baptized name was Patrick Henry McCarthy, but he's better known as Billy the Kid. And so maybe in the legends racket, it's good to have a catchy nickname and not be named something bland like Bill Tillman. I'll give you another case. There was a fellow who was a Civil War hero and who rose rapidly at a very young age to the rank of general. And after the war, he stayed in the Army, accepted a reduced rank, and begged the War Department to send him west to fight Indians. And they even wrote a book about his experiences. He eventually got his way and was sent west. And he was kind of a hard ass when it came to driving his men. He didn't treat them very well, and he pushed them hard. And he eventually led them into a trap where they were heavily outnumbered. He was wounded in the head, had a broken leg, and he held out with his men for more than a week, eating rotting horse flesh before they were rescued. Now, until I got to that last sentence, it sounded like George Armstrong Custer, but it wasn't. It was a guy named George Forsyth. The fight was known as the Battle of Beecher Island. It happened in 1868 and pitted 50 soldiers, cavalrymen, against about 600 Indians. And all but 6 of Forsyth's command survived because of his strategy in defending the island they were on. So why have most Americans never heard of George Forsyth, but they've heard of George Custer? Well, Forsyth didn't wear buckskins. He didn't have long, flowing blonde locks. He didn't hobnob with newspaper editors and Washington politicians. He didn't blow his own horn at every opportunity. And he didn't have a wife who made it her crusade for 50 years after his death to deify him and make him a legend in the Wild West. And I point this out because none of these guys became legends on their own. They were all, one way or another, the darlings of media. maybe it was newspapers, like in Masterson's case. Wild Bill Hickok was the subject of a cover story in a Harper's Magazine, which was a national magazine. And later on, they were the subjects of movies and television shows. And so they became part of the American tapestry. And I'll be glad when I'm finished here if you want specific examples of each of these guys kind of metamorphosed into a Wild West legend.